What's up, everybody? John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. I bet you're wondering what the heck is going on here. Why are you reading some weird DC Archive Edition book? These are DC's like kind of old collected editions that like rivaled Marvel Masterworks, and so they were very expensive and all that back in the day. I don't know if they still make them. Maybe they do. But the reason I got this is obviously because it's got Steve Ditko art, and in fact, it's got entirely Steve Ditko art. So there are 2 volumes of this Action Heroes, and what it is different characters from Charlton Press, which got bought by DC later. The famed characters were all kind of made into different characters for Watchmen because Alan Moore wanted to use these characters, and he got denied, and so he just made clone characters who were basically the same. So this volume features entirely stories of a character called Captain Atom, who becomes Dr. Manhattan, basically, in the deal. He doesn't have that whole nihilistic Dr. Manhattan vibe in this because that's not how Steve Ditko rolls. Got a nice dust jacket. I like the inside of these because you got the faux leather with this. It looks like it's like something out of a nice library, which I dig. So here we go. Blake Bell wrote the foreword to this, and Blake Bell did a lot of work just kind of getting to know Steve Ditko's work. He did the Fantagraphics Steve Ditko archives as well. So I'd be interested in talking to him. I actually don't know how to contact him, but I'd like to talk to Blake Bell and see what he thinks about all this stuff. Get a nice overview of Charlton Comics and what was going on through. He's a very in-depth forward, which I appreciate, and goes into it. So at the beginning, Captain Atom was in this series called Space Adventures, and he would just have one feature in the Space Adventures, and then there would be other features in there. And the first one is an origin story where he blasts off in a rocket and it blows up in a nuclear fashion, and he becomes a nuclear man, which means he can fly and disassemble himself and have super strength and is mostly invulnerable. Don't know how that works, but you know, his powers kind of depend on what the story is. And in these first stories, I gotta say the writing is not all that crisp. I don't know who wrote it. They were not credited, which is pretty typical for the time here. This is 1961, but you can see that Steve Ditko art right here, and beautiful designs with what's going on. Interesting character designs, very cool rockets, very dynamic stuff. And you get these like little 5-page Captain Atom adventures. A lot of them deal with him going up and rescuing somebody in a rocket who's got a problem with the rockets, dealing with sabotage, whether they come from different things or not. This one's interesting, and this kid is basically dreaming that he's out in space and sick, and so Captain Atom sees him out in space and hangs out with him out in space and comes back, and for some reason that makes the kid better. It's cute, doesn't really make sense. Really cool designs again with these like space eagle things that the kid's riding. And that's gonna be the story of this. It's a lot of cool looking art and cool looking design from Ditko. You'll notice that changed a little from the first issue, and he's got this like white hair. There's also a lot of stories of sabotage in here, and that this is probably the most interesting of the 5-pagers, where he runs into some girls from Venus, and the girls from Venus, try to tempt him or whatever, and he then comes back. Here it is, and they say they'll be back later. Now, what's interesting is there is a Girl from Venus story later, and it isn't remotely the same. So it's very, very, very interesting there. Like I said, lots of a lot of them are kind of the same with the sabotage elements and Captain Atom saving America. They weren't the best written things, but I like the art, so it works out. They're cute, and for 5-pagers, you can kind of read them easily. Get into one, get out of one. If one doesn't work out, it's not all that bad. So, let's see. Yeah, they get kind of progressively more bizarre as they go along. This one, like, there's a negotiation going on, and so he just runs out and he ends all their nuclear arsenal because they're all just standing in a line like this for him to do that with. And now the free world is saved because he's blown up all their rockets. For some reason, they don't actually explode as nuclear weapons do. I don't know. There's a lot of those, like, okay, they don't really explain how all this works. Like, you know, there's a couple of them where he repairs rockets, like, on the fly, and it's just like, oh, it's repaired now. It's like, well, how did you just do that in the middle of space, going 22,000 miles an hour or whatever? Like you say, it always says it's going 22 or 23,000 miles an hour through space. Going through a rocket, we got more sabotage stories. We got some flying saucers that he stops and destroys. There's a Russian cosmonaut who's sent off to Saturn for some reason, and he brings him back. Lots of Cold War vibe stuff in this too, where it's the U.S. versus the Cold War. Now this is another one that, again, there's a girl from Venus, and she's like mind controlling people through the TV, and so Captain Atom stops her, and she's very different than the other playful Venetians, whatever you want to call them, from the story before. There's just zero continuity involved there. And then those 5-pager stop, those are from like 1961, 1962. And then Ditko gets really busy, of course, on Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. But then he quits Marvel and comes back in 1965. And here we are. Then we get full Captain Atom adventures, and these are much better. They are written by Joe Gill, and the first one involves a scientist who's being harassed by aliens, and the aliens, is a very Ditko-esque alien design, for sure. And Captain Atom likes his daughter, of course, and he saves them. It's split into a two-part, but very nice expressive stuff. Love it. And I don't know. I mean, it'd be cool. I wish those characters would come back because there was like a budding relationship there. We don't see them again. And so there's some interesting personal stuff developing there. And in these longer stories, there's finally room for that. I guess my big critique of the first stories was just because they're 5-pagers, 6-pagers, or whatever. There's like zero personal development of characters. And so you just get the little vignettes, which is fun. But they get old really quickly. And there's just not all that much to them. And here we get a little bit more of a sense that, like, Captain Atom has a military career, and some of the generals know that he's got his deal. Some of them have a secret identity. It really depends on the issue, and I don't know why he's keeping a secret identity, as he doesn't have like a family or girlfriend or anything like he's trying to protect. Like, there seems no need for it, and like all the high up brass know that he's who he is. So it's like he's always worried about getting court-martialed, but why would he get court-martialed? I mean, the president would just stop that, right? So it doesn't make a ton of sense on the personal level, and it just wasn't given enough detail to really breathe there. But there's some pretty cool stuff. Dr. Spectro, this is a very, again, Ditko-esque design of a character. And this guy has different wavelengths of light, which he shoots out, and it manipulates people like into fear, mind control, and then some of it actually projects energy, and he can fight, and it creates a pretty fun fight with Captain Atom. Very memorable. So this is probably the most memorable issue of all of it. Again, just very nice Ditko expressions right there. All the art's remarkably consistent throughout all of this, of course. I love this. This is a Ditko representation of the world. You know, this almost looks Kirby-esque in a lot of things. You'd think that, but I actually went through his Doctor Strange, and he has a lot of these cool psychedelic visuals through those also, which are very nice and very fun. Very nice just space scenes in this one, which is cool. And in this one, you've got a group from another star in there, and that planetoid's about to crash into Earth, and the guy who is in charge of that little planetoid is going to save the day, but he also is going to try to take over Earth also. And so he kidnaps Atom, and he's going to power his evil machine, and then of course he escapes, and the guy's daughter dies over the course of it. So this is actually a pretty good emotional one versus the zany Dr. Spectro. You know, it's kind of got that like Adam West Batman camp to it. This one had a much more personal touch to the villain, which made it kind of interesting as a contrast. Dr. Spectro returns right again, and here we are. He's split into 5 Dr. Spectros. Again, we got that camp. When he shows back up again, he's 5 different colors, and one of them's actually good. The purple one's actually good and trying to help out Captain Atom, but then he fights these little... He thinks they're midget Dr. Spectros. It's really funny at first, and it's super campy, but it's super fun and cool also. And when he finally gets himself back together, he goes crazy and is talking to himself as like 5 different people, and so a kind of dark ending there, and that's that. And we get like kind of like a background of like nuclear power and how he uses his nuclear power, and we get into this is probably my... Did I say the other one was my favorite? I don't know. This one's actually my favorite. The last issue is excellent. And he introduces a new character who's called Nightshade. And she's a female superhero who is just helping him. And also introduces this character called the Golden Ghost. I don't know why he's called the Golden Ghost, as he's not golden. He's just a ghost. But he is ravaging through things and causing lots of problems because he can teleport in and out and phase himself in and out so nobody can touch him. And we see that. And the gal who's Nightshade is like this super wealthy gal. Her name's Eve Eden. And she is, of course, everyone's darling who loves her. And she's a daughter of a senator and beautiful. And, of course, attracts the attention of our Captain Atom. And she fights the ghost at this party along with him, and they learn that the ghost can teleport other people too, and they trap them in a like teleporting dimension for a sec before they return again shortly. And the very nice heroic pose right here between the two, and they start to build a relationship throughout all this as they take on the ghost. The ghost has a silly backstory, which is he was basically bullied as a kid. He was a smart guy, gamma male type, who then develops his thing, and he's like, I'll show them by stealing all the money and being the best. And he's going to steal all the gold in Fort Knox. And we get some personal moments between this Nightshade gal and Captain Atom. And then they conduct the battle and take down the ghost. And the ghost, his device backfires once Captain Atom messes with it. And he gets apparently trapped in his little dimension there. Again, a lot of dark endings for these characters. Like one goes mad, one of them loses his daughter because he was such a tyrant. And then the ghost, it's Joe Gill really pushed these endings, which were quite a contrast in feel compared to the lightheartedness and silliness of the stories, like stealing the gold in Fort Knox. Is pretty silly, but this ending is very, very not silly. So the last pages of these like really pack a punch through all of these last several issues, which is interesting. And this is the end of it. So I don't know. I know there's another volume of Action Heroes here, but I think that other volume, as I recall, it's on its way. So we'll see what it is. But I think it has completely other characters that Ditko drew for Charlton and doesn't actually continue anything for Adam. Now, what I would have liked, of course, is for a little bit more personal elements. I was looking for that in this. Having read Spider-Man or whatnot, you kind of start to crave that, and a little bit more of, I guess, continuity between stories, because there's different generals, and depending on one story, he's really cautious about his secret identity, and another story he doesn't care at all, and just shares it with Nightshade right away. So it's like, there's just no consistency there. There's no background consistency of supporting characters whatsoever. He doesn't have a family. There's one sergeant guy who shows up a couple times, but he doesn't really impact the stories enough to matter. So it would have been nice to have a little bit more of that through the big stories. The small stories had some pretty poor dialogue at the beginning there, and the writing was kind of cringy. So that was a little hard at the beginning. But overall, this, once it sets the scene. It's a pretty interesting character. And once he gets into his own story, I find that Captain Atom, kind of shines. So good stuff. 8 out of 10 overall. Worth the read, and a pretty quick read. I will talk to you guys soon. Have you read this? Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment. Let me know. And I will be back.